having a conversation about respect is usually a little bit awkward at best. And the reason for that is because the human mind tends towards self-judgment. And so having a conversation about respect doesn't conjure up images of how worthy we are. Instead, it conjures up images of how guilty we are or what it is that we want to hide. I always say that the first thing that crosses anyone's mind when you first meet them is what they want to hide. Immediately we go to protecting things instead of sharing things. There may be a few people out there who are the exception to that general rule, but generally speaking, as humans, we tend towards self-preservation. This is a completely natural phenomenon. It's not because we're all guilty, sinful beings. It's because we are beings who are geared towards survival. Now, this comes way back in the day when we were concerned about things like saber-toothed tigers chasing us down. And so our minds are geared towards protection, self-preservation, and survival. Thus, we automatically think of the things we need to be protected from, rather than revelation and expression and trying to share ourselves with the world. Our first and immediate reaction is always, how do I keep myself safe? And usually, safe is a result of hidden. Now, we're no longer living under those circumstances. We no longer need to hide ourselves in order to survive. And yet, this filter, the subconscious filter in our psyche, is still our main operating system. When we look at relationships, innately intimate relationships betray that boundary by asking us to do the exact opposite. We need to reveal ourselves, but many of us have done that in ways that compromised our safety or in ways that betrayed our own boundaries. And so having a conversation about revealing yourself unabashedly as the authentic you, and also balancing your own boundaries in a way that keeps you safe and protected and honored, those two things are very hard to reconcile. So that brings us to the topic of respect. Building a relationship that respects who you are in a way that honors your authenticity is something that humans have always kind of done, but usually by accident. And if it was a natural thing for you to do, you would not be listening to me right now. So presuming that the foundation of our conversation comes from the fact that you don't know how to do that naturally and you're trying to find your way into it, probably because you have betrayed those boundaries or because you have experiences that challenged them or challenged you, that means that we're coming at respect from the opposite side. The first part of it in any journey of respect and honoring one's authentic self is, of course, going to be your self-worth, your self-respect, your self-perspective, your internal perspective. At this point in the conversation, we are jumping in to the other side of it. I assume you want to have a conversation about healthy relationship boundaries because you've got to the point where you think you deserve to be respected. Your boundaries deserve to be respected, and that you at least deserve to have a safe space to be yourself inside of that relationship. So assuming that's been dealt with already, let's just talk about the idea of respecting one another's boundaries. Now, everything we're talking about here goes from two perspectives, within and without. Now, not without as in withholding something or denying something, but within as in your perspective, and without meaning with the outside world. When referring to any of the principles around respecting boundaries, we are talking about both respecting your boundaries or having your boundaries respected, as well as respecting someone else's. And so all of these precepts are a two-way street. They are how you apply it to other people and also to yourself. And one of the reasons for that is that it's all the same complex, no matter what direction it's going in. But also because I do believe that we need to treat others as we wish to be treated. And so if you think that your boundaries deserve to be respected, you better be the living example of what that looks like so that you can teach the other person by modeling. And so we just deal with it all as one conversation, and we assume that everything is being applied externally and towards oneself. There are 4 basic principles when it comes to respecting boundaries. The first one is awareness. The first level of defense, so to speak, is about being aware of boundaries at all, being aware that there are individual participants who are interacting with each other. So awareness is to cultivate the ability to see one another's needs, as well as one another's being. So awareness of boundaries isn't just the fact that, oh, there's a line here, now I know that that's there. It's also about being able to see the other person and therefore be able to see when something has actually stepped over that line, even when they can't. The way we approach the conversation about respect is often a matter of they will tell you where the line is and you need to honor that. But what we talk about as the first line of defense here, especially in alchemical work, is awareness trains you to be able to see where that line is before that other person even acknowledges that there is something happening. And so as the consciously evolving person, awareness is your responsibility, not a responsibility of the person who needs to defend their boundaries. I hope that makes sense as it translates. So as the conscious person, awareness of where that range of influence crosses over with another person's, that is your responsibility. The second layer, after awareness, being aware of yourself, being aware of the other person, being aware of the interplay of those energies, as well as the needs of that person and of yourself, all of that. The second layer of defense after that is intention. So intention is really about what is it that you mean to do. Now, the reason this is your second line of defense is because there's still some room for acknowledging the fact that you're still learning. And by that, I mean that you can do a lot of harm with the best of intentions. Just look at media. Awful things are done in the name of love. Just look at any romance movie that has an action component. I want to save the one that I love, so I'm going to murder hundreds of people in order to do that. How is that fair math? Anyway, intention is all about acknowledging what is your goal. Is your goal to approach someone? Is your goal to honor someone? Is your goal to express yourself? Is your goal to invade them? What is that goal? Whether you lived up to it or not is irrelevant at this point in the story, but intention is, okay, is my energy outgoing or incoming? Meaning, is my focus about revealing myself or about approaching that other person? The action may be the same. If you're trying to connect with another person, you're going to approach them. Or if you're trying to make yourself more available, you may be approaching that person. But your intention is going to be very different, which means the flow of energy is very different. Whether it's about coming at that person or whether it's about trying to get them to come to you, whatever that is. Your intention makes a huge difference. The third layer when it comes to respecting boundaries is all about compassion. No matter what your intention is, it still needs to honor the needs of the other person. So, compassion means if I want to express myself in a way that is uncompromisingly, authentically me, and that is loud and brazen, but that other person can't really handle receiving that, then compassion tempers the experience without it being considered compromise. So, if my loud revelation of myself would be disturbing or triggering or initiating or activating to the other person in a way that is actually going to compromise us making that connection, then compassion helps me find a different way of doing that, where I can still reveal all of who I am, but in a way that is considerate of that person. Now, this is a huge topic. We have entire courses about how to be unabashedly authentic while not being belligerent by being considerate of other people. It's a very big conversation. But this compassionate element of respecting boundaries is the first introduction to that conversation. The fourth line of defense, the final line of defense, when it comes to respecting boundaries, is withholding. Sometimes respecting your boundaries is a matter of keeping quiet. Keep it secret, keep it safe. And we talk about this a lot when we are oscillating around the conversation about spilling your joy. To not spill your joy, which is to share things in ways that they fall flat and actually undermine your excitement or your momentum. In order to not do that, sometimes we need to keep our mouths shut. Sometimes we need to stay quiet. Sometimes we need to just keep it to ourselves. A lot of the time, respecting our boundaries is a matter of finding a way to make the other person interested, to be mysterious rather than loud and compelling. Compelling happens in many ways, and one of them is by being mesmerizing and impressive, but another way is by being mysterious and allowing other people to be drawn in and curious and allowing them to approach us and inquire about us. As much as it is fun to have a bunch of attention when you've done something impressive, it is more self-affirming, arguably, more self-affirming when someone else shows interests and pursues you. That's what most people want, is to be pursued, not to be recognized by being loud and getting accolades and recognition, but rather by being pursued, by someone coming close and trying to draw you out or getting you to reveal yourself. It makes you feel precious and it makes you feel like you are valuable. And so that is the fourth aspect of respecting boundaries, withholding. Now, withholding can be done for different intentions. One is in order to not compromise your own reservoir of energy. And so we withhold information to protect it with the spilling your joy aspect. Another part of withholding is more the compassionate side, where it's a matter of the other person can't really deal with this or hold their own in this with us. And so we're just going to make that a no-fly zone until they are ready. We can show them that that is a part of who we are without making them face it, if they're not ready to actually engage with that aspect of us. And so what ends up happening is we have these little pieces that they just get a snapshot of to say it's like, hey, this is also a part of me, but also I'm going to respect where you are in your story and where I am in my story, because I'm still vulnerable in this, by not actually trying to meet there. Instead, I'll show you that it's an option and I'll put it away. Now, that's not pretending that an aspect is not part of you. It's actually honoring it to acknowledge it, but then not compromising it by trying to make it kind of a playground that you have no playmates in. And so you reveal it and then you withhold it as something that is tucked away for later. We see this a lot in like the dating world, where you'll kind of like tiptoe and show different aspects of yourself and gauge how someone responds to it. If they don't respond with the excitement you're expecting, then you just kind of like put it away and you hope one day you can bring it out again. And then eventually make your way back to being like, hey, can we explore that part of me again? I'd really like to bring that out to play. And so a huge part of respect is knowing where that line is with the different parts of yourself, which parts can play with certain playmates and which parts can't. We do this in business all the time. You can reveal the entirety of your character, your persona, but then you're only going to show up in one aspect of that character because that's the one that's appropriate for the situation. And then when you go out for drinks with your work buddies after work, you get to be a different person and they're like, oh, that's who you are when you're not at work. And so the work world is a place that we see it a little more clearly because it seems more appropriate to withhold aspects of ourselves. But it's true in all different relationships as well, because we need to acknowledge who we are in all of our different aspects, but also who's appropriate to be that person with. When is it appropriate to be that aspect of me? Depending on where you are in your conscious evolution, there are different teachings. And so the first level is a matter of you have to keep different parts of yourself kind of hidden because they're vulnerable, and you find different playmates to engage with different things. Eventually, when you're at master level, you get to the point where you understand that I can show up as 100% of all the different aspects of me and it not be triggering to anyone, simply because I recognize that they're not even going to see the aspects that are not relevant to them. Because what we do as human beings is we make contact at the edges of ourselves. And so when the edge of my etheric meets the edge of someone else's, there's an imprint and they see that part of me. But if I am a three-dimensional being who has edges all over the place and a multifaceted being, not every one of those facets is going to engage with that person. And so they won't even see the parts that aren't relevant to them because they're not making contact with them. In the beginning of our story, when we're trying to reveal ourselves to people, it is a bit forced. And so when we try and reveal ourselves, we put on these different hats, we put on these different personas or plays, and we show those people what it is we have to show them, whether they're receptive to it or not. But as we get more confident in things, what ends up happening is we integrate. So on the other side of integration, all those different facets are actually one expression of one being. They're not different expressions like they are in the beginning of the story. And so as you get to that mastery level where everything is integrated as a multifaceted being, you can show up in the entirety of who you are, because you understand that that person's only going to know what they're going to know, and it isn't triggering to you that aspects of you are not being recognized. So those teachings go a lot deeper, but recognizing where you are in your story, if you're at that vulnerability part where you want to only reveal what's confident, if you're at that place where you need to present different aspects of yourself because you're still mastering them, versus if you're on the other side of integration, you're this fully integrated, amalgamated beast of a myriad of faces in a way that is completely integrated and therefore completely authentic and therefore completely available all the time without compromise and without force, then you're playing by a very different set of rules depending on which one you're doing. But anyway, you need to respect where you are in your journey, what the boundaries are for where you are in the journey, because those boundaries and those needs are very different, as well as those same things about whoever it is that you're engaging with. You need to respect who they are, where they are in their journey, what their needs are, where they are in their journey, and how those two things, yours and theirs, match up, and what that world looks like when you start to co-create. That's the beginning of a conversation about respecting boundaries. The layers of your defense are awareness, intention, compassion, and withholding, all when appropriate to do so. Have fun.